Well, good afternoon, good morning, in fact. Welcome to the Bishop's office here in Palmerston North, and today I have Cardinal John Dew with me, and we're going to ask him some questions about the consistory and the election of Pope Leo. But the first thing I wanted to do, if I could, John, is to welcome you here and to thank you, because I know Cardinal John looked after this diocese for the 4 years that we were without a bishop, and I know firsthand from walking into this place what a fine job you did. Thank you. And how happy I was to be following on your coattails, as it were. Such an eminent man of the church in this country, and I was absolutely an honor. So, welcome. Thank you, John. And you're a son of this diocese, I think. Waipawa? Waipukurau.
Yeah.
Why don't you begin by just giving us a little bit of a history of your time here, and I think people in this diocese might be interested to know that you're from this place.
Okay, thanks, John. Yes, I was born in Waipawa in 1948, but we lived in Waipukurau, and we lived in St. Joseph Street, about 3 doors away from the church and the school, so there was never any hesitation about going to school or being involved in the parish. And of course, in fact, in a couple of weeks' time, St. Joseph's School is celebrating its centennial, which I think we'll both be at.
Yes.
So brought up in Central Hawke's Bay, around at St. Joseph's School, and then I always say to people, I should have been called Joseph because I went to St. Joseph's School. We lived in St. Joseph's Street. We were taught by St. Joseph's sisters. Then I went to St. Joseph's College in Masterton. When I went to the seminary, we had St. Joseph of Cluny sisters. The first 3 parishes I were in was St. Joseph's. So St. Joseph's been a very big part of my life.
Got it. Yeah.
But it was a wonderful place to grow up. And of course, when I went to the seminary, it was still one diocese. And it was only about 5 years after I was ordained that Palmerston North became a separate diocese. At that stage, Cardinal Williams had asked me to go and work in the Cook Islands for 3 years. And I'd only got there when I heard the news. And priests were asked to stay where they were for a few years, for 3 or 4 years, I think. And then if they wanted to change dioceses, and I thought, well, I'll just stay with Wellington, never ever thinking that I'd end up as the Archbishop. But I thought Wellington's just as close to home as it would be if you was in Taranaki or something.
Cool.
So that's how he ended up in Wellington. Yeah.
Welcome again, John. And that connection with St. Joseph, I suppose you spent most of your life being called Father. And of course, Joseph, a beautiful father, a foster father, if you like, to the Lord. So I think that was appropriate that you should have that connection with St. Joseph. So just thinking about the consistory and how that worked, endless details, I'm sure. You heard, and I'll ask you about that first, you heard about the death of Pope Francis. Do you hear via morning report or media, or do you get a special telegram, or no?
My sister phoned.
Yes.
And said, is it true? And I said, this what true? This was the Monday night. I said, is what true? She said, the Pope's died. I said, I don't know. I haven't heard anything.
Yes.
So I quickly turned the television on, and all the major news channels were talking about him.
Yes.
And it really amazed me when I saw like BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, all channels, and all of the presenters were all dressed in black.
Yes, amazing.
And immediately they gone into the sign of mourning somebody that the world knew and reveres. So that was how I knew, just like anybody else. I mean, we knew that he was very frail, and I had seen the news that evening, actually. Yeah, just earlier that evening, of him in the square on Easter Sunday, when he could hardly raise his hand and bless him. It was all he could do to, in a very frail voice, just bless the people in the square. And then he had evidently asked, we discovered later, to be taken around the square And it was very difficult even for him to raise his hand to wave to people. So he did look very frail, and he had been in hospital, of course, for quite some time. So it wasn't really that surprising to hear that he had passed away on the early hours of the Easter Monday. And
John, I had the privilege myself of meeting Francis earlier that year, and was amazed, firstly, by how frail he was, but then secondly, as you mentioned, how courageous he was. Always ready to meet and talk and be with people. A beautiful, always tribute to him. So you hear of the death of Francis, like the rest of us, but then there must be reasonably quickly some behind-the-scenes communications. You've got to go to Rome.
yeah, so immediately that night I thought, well, I'm going to have to spring into action quickly tomorrow morning.
Of course.
Because we had been given notice sometime before that with his illness, and it was a serious illness, that we really needed to be ready to get to Rome as soon as possible after we heard the news of his death.
What does that mean for you? That's on a plane in the coming days?
Yes, so on the Tuesday morning, I contacted the travel agent I use, and he said, I can get you on a plane this afternoon. I said, that's impossible. I couldn't possibly. I had a wedding scheduled for the Saturday and a funeral for the next Monday. So I had to contact another priest. Can you do a wedding on Saturday? Somebody else about the funeral that I was scheduled to do. And funnily enough, I'd been with the people, the family of the man who died on that Monday. And as I was leaving, his wife said, just be in touch about things. Unless, of course, the Pope dies and you have to go to Rome. And I said, oh, Rosemary, that won't happen. And of course it did happen. So I also had to, I contacted the place I usually stay at in Rome, because we have to arrange our own accommodation for the time of the general congregation of the cardinals and the days of mourning. The only thing that's arranged for us is for the time of the actual conclave to stay at Santa Marta, but everything else. So I contacted Danos Romana, where I normally stay, and asked them for accommodation. I said, I'm not sure when I'll get there. As it was, I did leave on the Wednesday about midday, so it was less than 48 hours after I heard the news. I was on a plane on the way to Rome.
How does that work, Ron? Is there some executive assistant in Rome that you timings, where do you have to be, what time do things start, all that? No.
No, they just know that the days of the 9 masses of mourning will start very quickly.
Yes.
As will the general congregation. So I arrived in Rome on a Thursday, about midday on the Thursday, the 24th of, he died on the 21st. It was the 24th. I went straight up to the Vatican to ask when the general congregations of the cardinals were starting, and it actually started that morning. And the first of that day was the second day of the masses of mourning, the 9 masses for Pope Francis. So you just got to find that out for yourself.
Awesome. And something fascinated me, and perhaps we don't need to dwell on it. I'm not sure you're a linguist. I'm certainly not, man. So things are in Italian. You just do the best you can. A little bit of English spoken. Yes. How does it work?
So the meetings of the cardinals,
Yes.
had already started. We meet in the synod hall, which is an auditorium.
Yes.
And they have you're assigned a seat. It is the same as when we had synods there, and I went to many of those.
Yes.
You put on a little earpiece, and you just tune into a channel to for the English, and the translators are fantastic.
Yes, I saw that experience myself.
Yeah, it's true. They're really fantastic. So we had date for those 9 days. Yeah.
John, you've already mentioned, I think it's true, the whole world. What's that biblical verse? All eyes in the synagogue were on him. The whole world was focused on Rome. And of course, we know the papacy, we hope as Catholics that it's sort of a point of unity for us, but it appears that the point of unity for many, many people in the world were interested about Pope Francis and his death and the election of a new Pope. Amazing, really.
It was incredible to see the enormous crowds.
Yes.
The weekend of his funeral was actually the Saturday that was scheduled to be the canonization of Carlos Acutis. And so there were many people there already for that. And it was one of the events of the Holy Year.
Yes.
So there were thousands of people in Rome anyway. But then dignitaries from all around the world just poured in, royal family members, heads of state, enormous numbers of people. And I kept thinking that organization and the security for these enormous crowds,
Yes.
and it wasn't just one day, it was day after day.
Yes.
Because there was the Requiem Mass for the Pope, but each of the 9 days of mourning, those masses each day, which we went to, they were usually in the evening. So we'd had our cardinals meetings during the day and then went to those meetings, those masses. Sometimes they were in St. Peter's, sometimes they were out in the square with thousands of people. But certainly the eyes of the world. And one of the things that fascinated me too around Rome, the huge electronic billboards, which are advertising things every day,
Yes.
had just great big photos of Pope Francis saying, "Goodbye, Pope Francis. Thank you, Pope Francis."
Most up, man.
And never been seen before, anything like that.
Yes.